Yo and hello, everybody. Welcome to Hobby Think Tank. I'm Mike. That's John. This is what you get this week. So thanks for tuning in.
I'm Cakes.
Oh, sorry. Cakes.
I will give you $5 if you know whose nickname that is by the end of the show. Don't Google it.
Is it a baseball player?
Of course. Of course it is.
Cakes.
All right. We can do a half an hour on that if you want.
Right?
On who Cakes is.
The comments are going to blow up. They're going to be like, you idiot, Mike, I'm sure.
It's a tough one, actually.
Okay.
Man. Yeah.
Okay, I have a topic for you. And I have to tell you how this came up. First off, if it's not painfully obvious to you, John, or to anyone out there watching, we're old. Yep. I went back and I've gone back and looked at my old videos, and I had an entirely non-gray beard.
Wow, man.
And that is so not true anymore.
Does the carpet match the curtains?
Nope.
I
get gray about that. That's when I'm in YouTube. Although, like on my wrists, like I had these white hair. I'm like, where did these come from? You know?
We're getting old, man. We may. Well, you know what? We're probably the last to know that we're old. There's some denial there, right? I'm sure.
Well, I am a couple other indicators that I'm old besides the gray beard. I am celebrating 25 years of holy matrimony this week, which
congrats.
You have to be old to make it 25 years in anything.
Did you get married just because of Y2K and you thought the world was going to end? You figured out what the heck?
Might as well go out together. It was July 99, right? So I thought, no, it had nothing to do with it.
Oh, okay. You were surprised at.
I just wanted to lock Julie down.
Lock her in? Okay.
I was like, I'm locking that down.
Good. Nice.
The other indicator is tonight for our anniversary. We went to two places. We're having a bigger party tomorrow night, but we went to first the Sketch. I had to get my new. Every year for the National, I get a new pair of Skechers.
Oh, dude, how long you been doing that? Because you are old.
3 years.
That's Golden Girl stuff right there, man.
I'm telling you. And Julie is teasing me the whole time. She goes,
"Please tell me they have laces, at least facsimile laces."
They have the facsimile laces.
Okay, all right.
And she teased me so bad. She's like, "Oh, I can't believe there's any handicap spots still available."
Oh, man.
Oh, do you have your AARP card ready to go? And the second thing was, then we went for an early dinner, 5 o'clock dinner at Chili's. So I'm a big spender.
Let me tell you something, man. If my wife and I aren't at Olive Garden by 3 p.m. on a Friday, they call the police to find out where we are. We are so early that they have to ask us, do you want the lunch portion or the dinner portion? And that is that's a fact. We love our Olive Garden on Fridays.
So being that we're old,
yeah,
and yet not ancient, but we've both been in the hobby. I've been in the hobby 1981. So what's that? 43 years.
Sure.
You've been in it equally long, if not longer, right?
Yeah, mid-70s. But I took like I said, I collected credit cards for a while, and picked up the cards again. Have kids, stuff happens. But been around the block, seen some stuff.
Sure.
Seen a few waves of things, actually.
So what we want to think tank for you guys today is, how do you know if you're a grumpy old man or just an old man in the hobby, or woman, an old woman in the hobby? Because I feel like I'm getting more and more cynical. Is that a sick? Like, we want to give you guys some warning signs, right? I'm cynical about everything. Is that weird?
No, I'm whatever you think your cynicism level is, I'm 10x that. I promise you.
I actually agree with that.
Yeah,
you are so bad. And
I'm not hopelessly optimistic. I'm full blown a cynic. There's no, but that's my coping mechanism with things, right?
Yeah.
Plan for the worst. See what happens.
And I'm old. I watched the entire debate last week.
Dude, well, let's move on. I couldn't handle more than 6 minutes of that thing.
You know who lost in that debate?
America, but
America lost in that debate.
got news for you. We're all host. And, yeah, it's, but I'll tell you this. This is, I will tell you, you and I, me again, more so than you, but you are definitely guilty of this. I think what helps you and I is we still have enough immaturity in us that that keeps us younger than other people in our year, make, and models. That's for sure.
I agree.
Maybe it's the cards, right? But still, it's you know, I think that it helps us for sure. Humor and a little bit of immaturity that keeps us young.
I do think we relate to, and there's a lot of guys in our age bracket in the hobby, no question. And we happen to be the ones that are at the point of buying all the cards we never could buy as kids, and so we have more disposable income than say the 20s and 30s guys. But I feel like I can relate to them a lot. I feel like I can relate to them more than I could relate to my parents' generation. True or false? Do you agree or disagree?
Well, that's interesting because our kids are like right between that. Our kids are like between you and I is a generation of junk waxers, which is interesting, right? Like our kids are kind of old, almost old enough. They're in their 20s
Yeah.
and on with their lives. And that's a weird thing that between our kids and us is the junk wax generation, like almost smack dab. So although you're part of that, I think more so than I am, obviously. But yeah, here's this is what makes me an old grumpy man in the hobby is it was kind of uncharted territory when I was coming up, as they say. The hobby was still defining itself. It was the adults were still there. I mean, the adults were there, but they weren't in masses like that would come along in the late 80s, early 90s. So the hobby was kind of in its infancy when I started coming along. That sounds weird. It was in its adolescence, I guess. But I think the part that gets me is the people that came up in the junk wax era. Uh, they know the perils of opening and buying endless boxes of wax cards and stuff like that, and yet it seems to be repeating itself by the same people that you speak of, which is weird. And that probably wasn't the question or the observation, but it's something that I've observed.
No, that's a great point. But I think that has to do more with not physical age, but age in the hobby. You can be an older person getting into the hobby, and you get the excitement and thrill of opening wax. We all do. I love opening a box of cards today as much as I did when I was 12.
But it's a loss leader.
That's right. And that's
Right.
where that experience in the hobby is not the same as being old. Those are two different things. They oftentimes run concurrently, but I see a lot of 40s and 50s guys that are, oh man, I just got into cards, and they just open wax like it's nobody's business, knowing, or they don't know yet. They haven't learned the
Interesting.
lesson.
So they missed the first wave, right? A 40 or 50-year-old man-child of today would have been in the thick of the junk wax era, and you're saying they missed that era, and now they're jumping on board, which is wow. That's crazy to miss that in your youth and buy into it as supposedly a more wise individual.
Well, the
Correct?
typical story is their kids get into it some
Yeah.
way,
Okay.
and it kind of drags them into it.
Listen,
And
I know a lot of people, well, and sorry to interrupt, but I
that's
do
all right.
know a lot of people that maybe when they were younger, for whatever reasons, they weren't into sports. My best friend in high school uh, couldn't throw a ball 5 feet. He was an incredible musician, but didn't even know where first, second, and third base were, right? Except for in the back seat of a car. But his kid ended up playing baseball, and the guy is the biggest sports fan in the world. And there's cases of that. People, obviously they bloom late, but you get to a certain point, maybe you go to college and you meet people. My son's an example of that. My youngest son played some sports, but he's more of a thinking person. But now he's like the stuff he's into now is crazy, sports wise. Just after 4 years of college, And then, you get into, I guess some people do get into it later in life. I didn't take that path, which is why it's surprising to me. But the more I think about it, maybe that makes sense, right? We all bloom and our interests bloom at different times.
Yeah. I was the same way as you. I was indoctrinated as a young kid with my dad, right? I mean, I'm going to ball games and sporting events with him. I couldn't help but become a sports fan. It wasn't like drinking castor oil to me. It was the opposite. I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And cards were just an easy, complement to that.
So what draws out your impatience with people or with situations in the hobby these days? Like, what triggers you, I guess, is what they say these days.
Lately, it feels, and this is probably not true. This is what makes an old man, because the reality is things have always been the way that we're going to describe them. And yet we just see it differently now with our perspective, but it feels so, and it may be because I'm selling a lot more stuff from the Grail collection and everything, but percentages and comps and all the BS revolving around the money aspect of the hobby just drives me bananas. If one more person on eBay asks me, what's the best you can do,
Yeah.
or what,
Yeah.
how cheap can you sell me this card? I got it listed for a price. That's
I
how cheap I
know.
can sell it.
I
And
hear you, man.
it's, well, the last one did this, the comps are this, I want a
Who cares?
percentage off of that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
don't buy it then,
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I run into that on eBay too. I for whatever, it could be $20 cards, it could be $1.52 cards. And, I get offers and I ignore. I have a new policy, new in the last 6 months, where I ignore most offers. Okay. Because I try to price my cards to sell. I'm not saying, fire sale prices, but I sell them. I literally, how I list is steal other people's listings from the sold. It says sell similar. I do that, but I look at the prices and I see what they're going for. And if it's a $12 card, I don't ask 14 for it. I'll more likely ask for 10. But that invites the people that say, I'll give you 5. Right. So I do get people that get pissy with me and say, well, why do you take best offers? I take best offers. If somebody wants to buy 5 cards and I can save on shipping, then I'll knock some money off of it. But it's not like, people don't understand, if you have something priced to sell, it's still not an invitation to drive that price down. And I understand that there are no guarantees, but like, again, you're probably like me, you're pricing stuff to sell because you want it to sell, not because you want people to window shop. But you know, it
and I
is, I've always told you about that. The money thing drives me up a freaking wall, that's for sure.
let me
But
give
go
you an
ahead.
example of a card I'm dealing with right now. This 72 Mays
Hmm.
for that
Hmm.
card show, and a PSA 9
Hmm.
came back recently. I put it on eBay yesterday, put it at $15.50 or best offer. Is that high? Yes. So I have 5 people watching it. I send out an offer of 1,400 to the 5 people watching it, because you can do that. So the last 3 comps are auction 1,035 a few days ago, but before that, 2 days before that, 1,300 and 1,400 were the last sales. And the guy sends me a guy, I assume it's a guy, maybe not. A person sends me an offer, 1,050. Last one sold for 1,035 is what he says in the comment. And I wrote back, this is totally old man. Yeah, but the last 2 before that, which were just days before, because there were a rash of sales given Mays's passing.
True.
And a lot of people listed cards, and it was, actually it was 1,200 and 1,300. I was wrong earlier. 1,200 and 1,300. So I sent back 1,250. I'm not in a hurry to sell it. Take it or leave it. And basically, that's grumpy old man right there. Like, totally, like,
Right.
you don't have to buy it.
Do not engage is what I say to you.
Well,
And that's the kind of card that's a card show card.
right.
That helps you. A dealer wants that because that would look incredible in a display case, right?
Yeah.
So save yourself 13%. and all the hassle, and maybe walk that over to a card show and see what you can get. Right? I mean, we all love cash, but we're also you and I, for instance, are driven by collecting cards. Selling cards is a secondary thing. So that's something that you might consider. Would you take, it might be better to take $1,000 in trade value or even a little bit more than to deal with all the shenanigans with the eBay fees and the taxes and all that stuff. So
That's just it. If I sell it for 1,050 for a card that sold literally recently for as much as 1,300, oh, it's not that much. Well, it is, because 1,050 turns into 900, after fees, and
1099s.
1099. And I really want to use this money to buy in more cards. Like that's the whole point.
There
So
you go.
it's not like I'm not raising my family with this card money.
And a card like that doesn't have, again, one thing that bothers me is the whole perishable nature of the hobby now, where you have to be first to market, all that stuff. A 972 Willie Mays is going to sell a week from now. It'll sell a year from now. It'll sell 3 or 4 years from now. So I don't like the expiration dates placed on the product. Obviously, it's mostly modern product, but what we have people coming in, whether they're old, young, somewhere in between, using that same mentality to vintage, and drives me up a wall. Like somebody like you that's telling you up, you better sell at 1050. This thing's dropping. It's not dropping. It's a 72 PSA 9 Willie Mays, for crying out loud.
And again, this is that I've talked about the life cycle of a collector, the maturation and evolution of a collector over their time in the hobby. And I think as you get older, vintage becomes more appealing for all the myriad of reasons that we love it. I won't bemoan those here, but it took me a while to get there. I was a current collector for a long time and went, okay, this is just beating my head against a wall. Thank you, but no thanks. And I decided to go vintage pretty much completely. I buy modern cards still, so as do you. I have Otani rookies and Soto and all the guys. I like those when they're key players and cool cards and all that kind of stuff. But it's the nuance of vintage is both fascinating and frustrating at the same time. And what I mean by that is I had a Hack Wilson that I sold yesterday, 33 Gaudy in a PSA 3. But man, it was like super centered, really beautiful. I considered it undergraded, but I'm not PSA, so whatever. And I was selling it for the high end of recent sales. I was trying to sell it for more than that. And I got an offer off eBay from a friend, and I ended up selling it to him because I did the math and I'd have to sell it for a lot more to net, because he sent me friends and family PayPal. Like there was a lot of money saved doing a private deal. I ended up doing slightly better doing it that way than selling it through eBay. But, he was is a friend of mine trying to lowball me. And look, that's how I am. He's like, I'm going to pull a baseball collector. I'm going to pull a Moynihan on this. Like he totally was saying that. And I'm like, who am I to criticize? I mean,
yeah, that's awkward though, man. That's awkward.
It was. And I ended up selling it to him because I wanted him to have the card, and it was his first Hack Wilt. Like he was excited to have it. He's a collector. I am more willing to deal with a collector type person than a dealer, flipper, whatever.
I bought a bunch of cards from George out in Arizona at a card show, right?
Yeah.
Well, I picked out a bunch of cards. It was nothing special. It was mostly, 64 commons and stuff like that. Just a bunch of cards. And I forget what else was in there. We looked at each other and we had like a standoff, because he says, well, what do you want to pay? I'm like, what do you want to add? Like I don't know whether he had the same thought I did. I was like, well, this was a bad idea because I don't want to offend George. He's set up here and George doesn't want to offend me by giving me, it was just a weird thing. And that kind of told me not to do business with friends. You know what I mean? Because it makes us both uncomfortable, which is the interesting about that story you told me about, your friend lowballing you. I was like, I don't want George to think I'm a cheapskate. And I'm sure George didn't want me to think that he was, one of those dealers. So it was weird. And anyway, I paid probably close to comps just because I didn't want to offend him or make him uncomfortable.
Well, it's funny you say that. See, I feel the complete opposite. I'd rather sell a card to you below what I could get from a stranger because I'd rather you have the card.
Yeah, I get that. It's just awkward. Like I don't, I've said before, money and collecting. I try not to. I know you need one to do the other, but I try not to let that get in the way. I try not to get too businessy because it takes away from my joy of looking at every card. And it sounds stupid and sappy, but every card in my collection, they're not equal, but I certainly adore them pretty much all the same way and in the same manner. And I don't want to think that, I paid X amount for that 53 Mantle. That's not any different than the 1965, Gomer Pyle card that I have, which I love just as much. So it's kind of like loving all your children the same way, even though one of them's a doctor and one of them is a YouTuber, something like that. They're you love them both the same, regardless of their standing in life.
Well, you'll be proud of me. My current project, literally, as I was doing today, is I'm taking a 1980 Topps baseball set and I'm putting it in a binder here.
Hey, that's that. So, by the way, that where you have that's where you put on the bottom of the spine there. You're supposed to slide a beater into there.
I have that on a lot of my sets, honestly.
Okay. Or a card that reminds you of that set. Like I have a lot of mine have like one of the first cards I had of each of those sets, and might even be the first card. That's what I put in the kind of reminds me of, keeps me with my roots. You know what I mean? If Nolan Ryan as an Astro, first year as an Astro, gets you excited in that, then you put Nolan Ryan in there. Was he an Astro or was he an Angel in that?
He was an Angel. 81 was his first.
Well, here's where I have a hard time with this. By the way, there's the pitch hit and run Burger King card is him as an Astro. So that's what's weird. Yeah, I was just thinking that. I know exactly what that Nolan Ryan Angels looks like. So
pitching, he's follow through.
Yep.
I can totally see the card.
Yep.
Does it make me an old man in the hobby if I love, like, this is going to be my evening when we're done recording, is me going and finishing putting this set, and I'm enjoying looking at all the cards and all the crazy Cubs uniforms. Remember the dark
powder blue, powder with the white pinstripes, right?
But ugly. But I'm loving remembering Manny Trio and Jeff Leonard and Greg Lazinski. I'm just thinking of Phillies right now, just to placate you, but so many great cards, and that was a great design.
Yep.
From when I was a kid, because I started in 81. So to me, 1980 was vintage. Like in my brain, it was like, oh my gosh, this card's so old. And it is
vintage. It is vintage.
Well, I mean, even in 1981, 82, I thought it was vintage.
All right.
I remember.
I laid into you a little bit on one of your shows about that, but about the delineation between 80 and 81. It's like, it's not just a time period. There's a lot of things that happened in 81.
Sure.
Which changes the game. Yeah. Update sets, all that stuff. So it was game changers, and it's a delineation, but I didn't consider that vintage back then. I didn't even know what vintage was until 1979 when Dr. Jim's first book came out. Then I opened my eyes to, like, wow, there was cards before 1975. So the discovery period between 79 and maybe 85 was absolutely amazing. I bought all sorts of old cards because of that. But
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You're bringing up a great point. When we discovered new things, there was always this, for a long time, it was this age of discovery for me in the hobby, learning about new stuff and then getting into, learning about pre-war and 50s, 60s, all these things, right? And then now that I feel like my knowledge base is, I certainly don't know everything. In fact, there's plenty I still need to learn, but a lot of this, like, I go to a show now and I see a case full of mantles and mazes and I'm like, seeing them all. Maybe is there hobby fatigue? Here's the question, I guess I'm getting to. Is there hobby fatigue for a person that's been in the hobby for so long? Think about Dr. Jim. The reason he sits at dollar boxes at shows is because he's seen everything else. He wants to find something new that he's never seen, and he's probably going to find it in a dollar box looking through a hockey dollar box or something. Does hobby
Yeah.
fatigue
Well,
happen?
it's changed though, because I think the people of maybe the 70s and beyond were predominantly set builders. And Dr. Jim has spoken about, I had this set, I got that set, this set. Now people have found different ways to collect, whether it's somebody like Mark Hoyle, who has so much Red Sox stuff that Dr. Jim is endlessly amused by it, and fascinated by it. It's just there's different ways of collecting now than there were back then before before 1981 when we were building our own sets. And I don't know, and then more people became player collectors or team collectors or whatever. Some knucklehead in Pennsylvania buying Ray Keating Z-Nut cards that would not have done that 40 years ago. So, there are different ways now to collect, even though the same cards were available, but there's different ways to collect now that I think keeps it entertaining. Again, I've been collecting for maybe 50 years, and I'm still endlessly amused by the stuff I'm getting, the non-sports stuff that about, and you told me about. Here's an example right now, the Discovery, right? As much or more about vintage baseball cards than most people, right? Do you mind telling the people the card you told me you were keeping today that nobody would have expected?
Yeah, the 69 tops Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah,
Who else?
nobody would have had that on their bingo card last year. Mike Moynihan, Lou Alcindor, right? Your horizons continue to be expanded. Dr. Jim's seen everything. We know that, but I think that he is he's in a different phase where he's had everything, and he certainly doesn't want to keep piling stuff into his collection. But I don't think that his enjoyment has been tempered at all. I think he continues to see how other people like to collect stuff, and even he might even fall into the category of people. The hobby is for them is the hobby. You and I, the hobby is collecting cards and accumulating cards, and obviously friends as well. But there are people like him and Rich Klein who the hobby itself is their hobby, which is kind of unique as well. He's Dr. Jim doesn't bring in the cards like he used to, the old cards, but he certainly isn't slowing down on collecting people in his life and stuff like that. And you and I are an example of that, right? Like we weren't in his life back in the day, and suddenly look at us now. He can't get rid of us. So.
Right. Interesting on the Alcindor. I've picked up over the years because I don't know what it is. I really like key cards, and I'd love a Jim Brown rookie, for example. I would love, and in football, you think, I have a Montana rookie, I have a Jerry Rice, I have Elway, Marino rookies, I have Aikman, Barry Sanders, these guys that I grew up, Tony Dorsett, key guys that I like. And then in basketball, I'm like, I'd love a Maravich rookie. I don't have one. I would love one of my favorite cards that I would love to own is a Julius Erving rookie.
Give me a second. Give me 1 second. I'll show you what I got this weekend.
John got something cool, which is always true. I'm just impressed that he's wearing pants. At least I think those were pants. Look at John's basement. I've been there. I've been in that basement.
I don't show many cards. I walked into my LCS the other day with my world famous white binder, working on my 67 set, right? My 67 baseball set. It's about dang time. Well, I walked out, unfortunately, with 61 Fleer, Chamberlain, and Bill Russell, right?
Chamberlain's in action, yeah.
In action in the Bill Russell. So that's not something, it's an opportunity. We're sitting on the counter, my LCS, with I got two other ones for dirt cheap as well from that set. It's like this is a hobby of opportunity, and you're allowed to change. It doesn't mean you have to completely pivot on your whole collection, but you're allowed to take those little journeys with the Alcindor key cards, right? That we talk about, stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with you getting a Gretzky because it is an iconic card, a rookie Gretzky.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And I'd take Topps or OPG. I want the Bird Magic rookie.
Yep.
Um,
But that's a tribute. Guess what? That's you paying tribute to the hobby, because those cards are their mark on the hobby is undeniable and forever. It isn't a, we joke about shiny cards, but it isn't a card that could be worth $20,000 this week and next year worth $80. That's a tribute to the hobby, an homage to the hobby when you pick
it
up
is a
something
tip
like
of the
that.
cap. It
Yeah.
is. It's totally that way. I would say if I was to define my kind of ultimate collection goals, it's I want to have an extensive baseball Hall of Fame collection with both cards and autographs, and I want to have a well-rounded collection in other sports.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. I love all sports. People think I'm just a baseball guy, and no question, baseball would be number one, but I love football. I love basketball. I love college football, I love March Madness. I love golf. I love, you know, uh, it's, I love cornhole and pickleball, so all of this stuff. That's the biggest thing for me. Cards are just a way to express that.
Well, they're art, right? I have them on my wall because they're art. They're artistic, and it really is. It's Wilt Chamberlain dunking a 2-pointer, or Bill Russell, a 6'9" center going against a 7'6" Wilt Chamberlain. It's like there's beauty there that is undeniable and undefinable. The cards these days are beautiful, but when the originality ends after the base card and every other valuable card is just a different copy of that base card, that's
But
when I
you
become the old man. It's like, where's the originality there?
But you also know, having those two cards together, what an amazing
Right.
rivalry Chamberlain and Russell were in the 60s, and through the 70s. They were, always battling, and
Yep.
other guys would pretend to be Bill Walton, great center, but he wasn't Wilt or Bill Russell,
Right.
And we're in that generation where that's being lost maybe a little bit in people.
So where do you think the argument was in the 50s when Mickey Mantle walked the earth like a god, and somebody's father said, "Well, you should have seen Lou Gehrig." I'm sure they were arguing about that, right?
Well, in the baseball documentary, Bob Costas is giving an interview about how much he loved Mantle as a kid. That was his guy, and he argued with his dad, and his dad said, "Kid, you never saw Joe DiMaggio play.
Well,
you never saw the real thing, And it's like, dude, I would say Mantle had a better career than DiMaggio.
DiMaggio was better. I will fight you on that any
Okay,
day of the week. He was better. He was
but
better.
of course, there's always going to be, LeBron's the greatest.
He's not the greatest, Michael. Come on.
I'm
Don't
saying people could
don't
say
encourage people to think that.
but I still would I want to own a LeBron James rookie in my collection someday.
I get it. Yeah. I mean,
have a Kobe, I have Luka, I have Dirk, I have
right. Well, that's great, right? But do you
yeah.
need all five? Do you need 1 through 5 of 5? No,
No.
it's okay to touch greatness, but to want to be greatness, and collect for bragging rights, like a lot of these cards I think promote these days. There's no difference in any of those cards other than, well, you have it and I don't. That's what a difference is between a 1 of 5 and a base card. I have it, you don't. So I think that's wrong. I think that's one of the things wrong with the hobby is, again, the money attached to it and the prestige attached to it. It's just enjoy the cards, right? Enjoy the history. Enjoy your 1978 Greg Minton, right? And who cares what it's worth?
San Francisco Giants.
Or your Don Mossy, right? Like, it's like that's what makes the hobby great. Lowell Palmer's, all that stuff. It's like it doesn't need to be the biggest banger. It just needs to be a card that makes you giggle, maybe.
Yeah. Well,
you were going to tell me a story and you were going to make me laugh. I don't know whether we got that point, or maybe you told the story and I didn't laugh.
About the Skechers, but
okay, yeah, that was funny. I'm sorry.
All right, guys, we are half hour through our 4-hour discussion today.
Yes,
on this.
Change your diapers.
Great points. I think we would love to hear what you guys, if you're an old man in the hobby, what makes you an old man in the hobby? What do you guys think? I don't know that John and I answered any of that, maybe a little, but John and I just like talking. So
yeah, let me say this though. I will tell you that I'm not a finished product in the hobby. I have learned a lot in the last several years, and I continue to learn. I've changed directions a few times, not drastically, but I've changed course a few times, and I'm not afraid to evolve and stuff like that. It's a lot like life, right? To continue to evolve. So I haven't closed everything off, but I do get impatient because I hate to see the same mistakes made over and over again. And that's when I get a little snipey and snippy and bitchy. That's because of that. I just hate, like, hey, we've been here before. Why do we continue to go down this path? So that's usually why I'm grumpy, or when I'm my most grumpiest.
I get it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch y'all next week for another hobby think tank. Have a great week. Happy 4th of July. Keep collecting.
Have some cakes.
Who's Cakes? Tell me who Cakes is before we go.
It's Jim Palmer.
Ah.